morning. I'm Kim McCleary, President and CEO of the Los Angeles World Affairs Council and Town Hall. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you all for your ongoing support. If you're enjoying our free webinars and would like to join the effort to keep them going, we've just launched a new platform that makes giving easier than ever before. So please stay tuned for just a few minutes at the end of this program, and we'll fill you in on all of the details. Also, please visit our website at lawac.org. We have a terrific lineup of programs through the summer and well into the fall. And we have special member-only programs which enable members to interact directly with speakers. So if this appeals to you, please become a member, make a donation, or even consider sponsoring one of our live streams. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, we will be taking questions in about 20 minutes. There's a panel on the right-hand side of your screen where you can type in your questions. Jessica DeGanzik, our Vice President of Events, will be managing your questions during the Q&A portion of today's program, and we'll try to get to as many of your questions as possible. It's now my great pleasure to introduce today's program, The Future of Higher Education. Our moderator today is LMU President Timothy Snyder, and he's joined by several key faculty members from LMU. We have Stefan Bradley, who's Professor of African American Studies and Coordinator of Diversity Inclusion Initiatives. David Choi, Director of the Fred Kiesner Center for Entrepreneurship. And Kate Pickert, Assistant Professor of English Journalism. President Snyder, we are so thrilled that you will be moderating today's program. I'm ready to turn this over to you.
Thank you kindly, Kim. Colleagues, please feel free to join us. I am delighted to be part of this webinar, and I thank the Los Angeles World Affairs Council and Town Hall, probably the group that has the most confusing looking mnemonic. Everybody wants to call us LA Watch, for welcoming me and my colleagues to discuss how LMU, through our teaching and scholarship, is seeking to be a force for good in the world. Why is this important to LMU? It's simply in our DNA. Our Catholic, Jesuit, and Marymount heritage emboldens us to cultivate students of all faith traditions, cultures, and origins. We are driven to accomplish greatness as we serve our mission. The mission of our university is threefold: to encourage learning, to educate the whole person, and to engage the service of faith and promotion of justice. Our students strive to become change agents who understand that inclusivity, inquiry, and lifelong learning are essential ingredients for a purposeful existence. And these are the ingredients that are the font of human creativity. And I emphasize that diversity and collaboration are central to our coming human creativity. LMU contributes roughly $1 billion of direct economic activity to California. That includes 5,300 jobs. We boast Nobelists, Pulitzers, and Fulbrights on our faculty. We rank among the top producers in the nation of Fulbright students. And we really devote our talents and our creativity to our students. We indeed see creativity as the key element of our human and earthly future, and all we do is purposely focused on those futures. Which brings me to our stellar panel of teacher scholars. These are my colleagues, my LMU family, who make all possible. Stefan M. Bradley is coordinator for diversity and inclusion initiatives in the Bellarmine College of Liberal Arts, where he is a professor of African American Studies. Professor Bradley received his Ph.D. in 20th century US history with an emphasis on the Black experience from the University of Missouri, Columbia. He is author of the award-winning book, Upending the Ivory Tower, Civil Rights, Black Power, and the Ivy League. He is an educator at heart, and his life ambition is to personally teach, mentor, and inspire the young people who change the world for the better. And though I'm not necessarily young, I count myself in that ever-expanding group of people inspired by Professor Bradley. David Y. Choi is professor of entrepreneurship in the College of Business Administration. He also serves as director of that school's top-ranked Fred Kiesner Center for Entrepreneurship. Professor Choi has founded, built, and sold companies in biotechnology, energy, financial services, and foods. He has co-authored a book called Values Centered Entrepreneurs and Their Companies, and has published peer-reviewed articles in entrepreneurship, tech management, and strategy. Formerly, Professor Choi served as the founding fellow of the Leadership Initiative at the Harvard Business School and has worked as a consultant with the Boston Consultant Group. Professor Choi holds a Ph.D. in technology management from UCLA, and he's really helped LMU rise in this highly contested competitive space of entrepreneurship programs. We are typically ranked somewhere in the top 10 or top 15, depending on the year. Kate Pickert is assistant professor of journalism in the Bellarmine College of Liberal Arts. From 2008 to 2015, Professor Pickert was a staff writer at Time magazine and a freelance magazine writer and newspaper reporter before that. She has taught journalism at the Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism and the Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism at USC. She received an MS from the Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism. Professor Pickert is the author of the highly rated, particularly by the New York Times, book Radical: The Science, Culture, and History of Breast Cancer in America. Today's conversation will focus on three areas where LMU excels and where today's panelists are giants in their field, namely diversity and inclusion, entrepreneurism and social good, and journalism. So within these areas, we seek to create the world we want to live in. Our calling has never been more important. Seeing the execution of George Floyd was an inflection point for our world, but especially for America, where police violence and systemic racism infect our society. We are being held accountable by our students. We are also holding them accountable, and we are preparing them for leadership roles and equipping them with the tools that they're going to need to thrive as they become, as I like to say, vectors for the greater good. LMU's imaginative community of creators, makers, and doers prepares our students to lead for transformational change. So let's turn to Professor Bradley for a first question. Could you please share the history of how change happens, and particularly the role of protests and destruction of property in drawing attention to a given cause?
Wow. First of all, thank you, President Snyder, and thank you to the LA World Affairs Council. This is a big deal to be here, and I appreciate you all caring about the issues right now. I don't know if I'll ever be invited back, so I'm going to go ahead and take the liberty of telling the truth as I see it. One of the things that I always think about is how the narrative of U.S. history is so often skewed. We like to think that everything in the United States happened peacefully. There would be no United States without violent disruption. We would all still be British citizens. To bring it closer to home, there would be no California were there not violent disruption. It took a certain kind of violence, a certain kind of disruption to create whatever America views as freedom. And that started with the Boston Tea Party, where those Americans destroyed those good British citizens' tea and that sort of thing. But when we talk about change in this country, when we talk about progress, we've always tried to impose a certain kind of people should, particularly Black people, should march peacefully, should be nonviolent. When in fact nothing has changed in this country without a certain amount of disruption and even violence. So you look towards things like, say for instance, the 8-hour workday. There would be no 8-hour workday without labor activists violently disrupting. when women, particularly white women, were being beat upon by their husbands who went to the bar after work and stayed there till they were drunken and then came home and abused their spouses. Those women, often Christian, went into the bars and didn't just pray and hope and wish, but they brought their axes and tore down the bars so that they could have something called a temperance union and to affect policy. So I mention this because when it comes to American advancement, there's a myth out there that somehow it happens by way of just going to the polls or just wishing good things to happen. When in fact, it takes people going to the streets, especially when we're talking about Black freedom, people going into the streets, people disrupting life. I have to mention, for the sake of disclosure, that I was maybe day 2 on the streets in Ferguson, Missouri, where when people felt that their rights were violated, they had to react in the streets. I think it's appropriate to mention that because today also marks, I believe, the beginning of the Watts uprisings in 1965, where again, people may have thought that this was about a bad interaction between a police officer and a young man, as the situation was in Ferguson, as the situation was here in Minneapolis. Well, it was more than that. People could be oppressed and marginalized for so long, and things build up, and these were the sparks. And so I carried on a little bit long, but I wanted to show that in America, violence and disruption, these are things that nobody looks forward to. But in terms of change and progress, sometimes these things happen in order for things to move along.
Thank you, Professor Bradley. Would anybody like to chime in on any of those comments? I'm sure our guests will chime in with a question or two later on as we move forward. Let's continue. Our commitment at LMU to rigorous inquiry and enlightenment is led by expert faculty who yield alumni who are knowledgeable, discerning, and prepared to meet the world's most pressing challenges. That's our forte. Professor Pickert, let's turn to you. Can you please talk about what it has been like as we prepare our students for careers in journalism that are all about truth?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me, and I'm also really thrilled to be here. And I wanted to actually just pivot off something that Professor Bradley talked about, which is this idea of disruption causing change and a better world in the end. And I think that this is something that is happening in journalism now. We're certainly in a real state of disruption. And have been since the advent of the internet and the digital revolution that changed the distribution of news and the production of it so fundamentally. But in terms of preparing our students, it's a really interesting time to be teaching journalism. I think it's a very exciting and amazing time to be teaching journalism, because journalism itself has become part of the news. We're hearing the president and other leaders across the country talk a lot about the value or lack of value in truth, information, and in particular broadcast and newspaper journalism. And that's created a lot of challenges, right? So one is that trust in the news media is very low. It hovers around between 20 and 25% of Americans say they have a great deal of faith in the news media, which feels disheartening, but I also think it's kind of inspiring because it presents a big challenge for those of us who are in journalism and for students kind of entering the field to how do we increase that trust? How do we sort of re-explain again the role of journalism in a healthy democracy and why the people need a healthy free press in America. So that's presented a lot of challenges. And one of the ways that we try to prepare our students is, number one, to really teach them what is real information. How do we find it? How do we vet it? How do we sort of assemble it together to create a cohesive analysis or an investigative story that really connects the dots in ways that will be impactful and also memorable for our audiences? But also, we're really trying to teach our students about sort of how to do good reporting, but also how to explain to our audiences what it is we are doing when we're doing storytelling and when we are doing reporting. I think, you know, before the internet, the news media really didn't have to compete with anyone else for you know, who had a hold on information. Gatekeepers are gone now. The people, the citizenry, the public produces a lot of content on the internet that the news media now must compete with. So how is it that we differentiate our work from all of the other musings on the web and video and podcasts and in text that's published? And I think one of the ways that we can do that is total transparency. So we teach our students a lot about, you know, show your work is something that, you know, math professors, Professor Snyder, you'll know, talk about, but in journalism, it's really, really important. And so we're seeing our students we're seeing our students write a lot of different styles than the way that I was trained as a journalist 20 years ago. There's a lot more first-person journalism. Here's where I went, here's who I talked to, here's why I had these particular questions, and here's why I believe this is true. So we're teaching our students a lot about how to deconstruct information and news reporting and journalism, and how to both distribute it in a way that's compelling and memorable, but also in a way that is believable. We are, you know, the American press has always been, there's always been you know, some segment of the population that doesn't trust journalists and doesn't trust the news media. But I think we're at a really critical juncture here. So we're kind of, on the one hand, fighting that battle, but on the other hand, also there's so much misinformation to sort of be corrected and hopefully overshadowed by good information. So the challenges are great right now for journalism students, for working journalists, for news organizations. Entrepreneurship is something we need more of in journalism, because the business models are really, you know, being challenged in major ways. But the way that we're really preparing students is to get out of their own communities, the same traditional, you know, gumshoe kind of journalistic techniques, get out into the community, talk to people, don't just talk to the leaders and the people who are the loudest and the people who have the most power, but of course speak to sort of lots of regular folks to understand stories out there that aren't getting aren't being distributed, aren't being heard, and, you know, in ways of hopefully impacting positive change. I'm a journalist, so I really believe in the power of storytelling to make change. And I think that in terms of social justice and social good, I think journalism is just a really fantastic place for young people to try to make that change quickly, because our students are, you know, they can make a difference right now and do stories right now and publish right now. So we are trying to really make our students practitioners of journalism while they study the craft as well. So that's sort of our efforts right now. It's a lot to do, but it's fun and exciting, and I'm hopeful that all of this disruption will actually make our journalism better in the long run.
Thank you. I find it interesting that you referred to online communications as musings. So next time I get one of those really hateful, nasty ones, I can say, well, it was just amusing. And that might clear my mind a little bit. Would others like to add thoughts?
Well, I find it interesting that both Stefan and Kate mentioned the word disruption. You know, I thought that that's something that I dealt with in the world of entrepreneurship and technology. But in more recent years and months, there's been so much disruption of all kinds in so many different industries and parts of society. I feel there's a connection here.
And one of the things that's running through my mind is the idea of how important the media is to movement making. And so journalism has, you know, traditionally been one of the powerful allies in terms of Black freedom. It's worked against Black freedom in some ways, but during an earlier period, it took good journalism to expose the various elements of racism, of oppression and discrimination that took place. And so disruptors can come from a number of different areas. And so I can see that. And so I look forward to the conversation as we move forward.
Thank you. Our whole person education, as we like to call it at LMU, really emphasizes working with the individual and the understanding of that. And this is where our Catholic heritage plays in. We consider that every person born is a person born of immutable dignity. And so when we talk about a whole person education, we really think of students in that way. So every faculty member knows our students by name. We talk about education of the mind, body, and spirit. And the ultimate goal there is to result in behaviors among our students throughout their lives, ethical, committed, and compassionate. And this leads us, of course, to Professor Choi. I'd like you, if you could please, to discuss the Entrepreneurship Program at LMU and share examples of students and alumni who have started businesses who exemplify a commitment to social, or as we like to call it, the greater good.
I could go for hours. First of all, thank you, Tim, for the opportunity. Thanks to the World Affairs Council for the opportunity to say a few things about the Entrepreneurship Program, which my colleagues, my faculty, staff, students, and alumni are very, very proud of. Just a little plug, we're one of the first universities in the country to have an entrepreneurship program when we started teaching in 1972. And as Tim mentioned earlier, we've been one of the most widely recognized, one of the top ranked programs in the country. And I think, speaking of Jesuit values, what sort of sets us apart is, first of all, our faculty's dedication to our students for the education of the whole person. And that's usually resulted in a highly relevant curriculum, which also includes, by the way, experiential learning process or learning by doing. And then the other thing that's really sets us apart is our focus on social responsibility. So our slogan for the longest time used to be teaching entrepreneurship with an emphasis on social responsibility. And that's also consistent with the mission of the College of Business, which is about advancing knowledge, developing leaders with moral courage and creative confidence to be a force for good. So when we talk about what we try to do is in the Entrepreneurship Program is, first of all, really develop the skill sets that tomorrow's business leaders and entrepreneurs need. And if you look at most surveys, they mention words like creativity, problem solving, empathy, resilience, leadership, teamwork, communication skills, and those things. And we do this by most of the times through experiential learning. Imagine a student working on a project of their passion, being guided and mentored by the professor. They can test their ideas in the real world, collaborate with companies. So we try to provide the most relevant education possible, most practical, that addresses intelligence, but also emotions and other aspects of the student. But the other thing that we really emphasize is, social responsibility. So we want our students to be entrepreneurial, successful, but also to be responsible and caring. Because not just because we're a Jesuit school, which is a good enough reason, but because having empathy, caring, wanting to solve problems, that is fundamental to the entrepreneurial process, right? How can you find a great idea if you can't relate to people's problems, right? So those go well hand in hand. And if you look at, for example, what some of our students have been doing this summer, and we just finished last week a multi-week program where students, entrepreneur students, coached, mentored about 100 high school students on financial literacy. These high school students from disadvantaged communities, right? So our students develop themselves by coaching, but also more importantly, we helped 100 students become more comfortable with money, Okay, and hopefully they'll learn about money, and hopefully they'll make and save and utilize money effectively. Early in the summer, our students raised $50,000. Entrepreneur student and another college of business student raised $50,000 for the Black Lives Movement, written about in today.com. So our students find themselves being busy with useful projects like that. But if I can speak just maybe a few examples of what our alumni have done. There's so many, but let me just mention a few. One of the projects we incubated right on campus, this is already almost 7, 8 years ago, but it was a company called Liquid IV, right? They've already sold hundreds of millions of dollars of products, but most recently, with the pandemic, they gave away 2 million units of the products to healthcare workers. The products are around hydration, energy, and sleep. If you think about what healthcare workers need, right? They need to get hydrated, or they're wearing this big gear. They need energy to provide natural, healthy energy. And then sometimes they're too wired to sleep, right? So we give away 2 million products for free. Another company, for example, again, launched on campus, Drip Cycle. It collects water coming out of air conditioning. It saves water. We use that water for lawn and stuff like that. That technology has been implemented now in major companies, all the companies we know about. And it won the Silicon Valley Water Certified Conservation Award. Another company called Maya. It's a powerful ATM machine designed for people without bank accounts, people who are underserved, and you can do check cashing right in the machine at a much lower rate. You can wire money. You can pay bills online on the machine. So we've created all kinds of companies that are profitable, but also doing a lot of social good. So this is a few of our examples.
Thank you kindly. Have others some final thoughts based on at least our initial questions and answers, or some thoughts about Professor Choi, entrepreneurship, and his work, and that of our students?
No, special shout to those students who managed to raise $50,000. This is recently on behalf of this movement that's occurring on the streets and looking to help people make advancements. I loved what Professor Choi said about courage and creative.
Moral courage, creative confidence. It's in our mission statement. Yes.
Yeah, that's important.
These students are extraordinary. Professor Bradley, I and others have been working with them as students who can inform us of the realities of the Black experience at LMU. So we have a strong initiative to become an anti-racist institution, and being embedded in society and being brought up as people are raised in the United States and elsewhere, we have a lot of work to do. And the students have a great creativity, a great confidence, and also great trust in us. So we're literally speaking with them later today, and they include the 2 entrepreneurship students whom we allowed to take over our Instagram account to help raise more money. So that was after they'd already raised 50, and I'm hoping they give us an update and tell us what they've been doing lately. They're really fun to work with.
Yeah, shout to Desmond and Christian for their work. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks, Stefan.
You mentioned racial relations. So one of the I could go on, but one of the many initiatives we're planning for the fall for the school year is a promotion of justice challenge. It's a college of business-wide initiative. We're going to be studying companies that are exemplary in the racial relationship. And we're going to have students studying these companies. We're going to give awards or recognize these companies, but we're also going to recognize and award students who've done a good job of studying these companies. There are going to be awards and prizes at the end of the year. But it's just another effort on our college's part to motivate our students to learn the issues of the day and provide practical, relevant education.
That's awesome. And as I observed toward the beginning, one of the emphases that I've been trying to share with the institution, and certainly I've discussed these in my annual convocations, is diversity being the font of human creativity. If you look at any great human creation, and that includes things that are considered to be done by soloists, the Einsteins, the Marie Curies of the world, they typically are drawing on great numbers of people who contributed ideas into the mix. And I think as we go forward and seek to become more creative with all the complexity that the world presently offers us, the more voices, the greater the number of experiences and literally backgrounds that one can bring to the picture, the more likely we will be to succeed. Anything that excludes anybody is not just a loss for that person, but really a loss for humankind as we attempt to move forward. So that's one of the mantras that I keep singing at our institution. I thank Professors Bradley, Pickert, and Choi for their contributions thus far. We have another ethic that we like to explore at LMU. We don't always succeed. We find that academics can talk, and out it comes. And to have about half the time for Q&A really helps us learn more, and also hopefully helps others. So I'm going to turn things over to Jessica, who will have some questions for our panelists.
Great, thank you so much. And to the audience, if you want to submit any questions, you can do so on the control panel. And if you can note which panelist your question is for, that would be great. The first question, and President Snyder, this one is probably for you. Do you believe your plans are unique, given that your institution has a smaller footprint and population of faculty, staff, and students than other local universities like USC and UCLA?
Well, that's an interesting question. I don't think they are unique. One thing that distinguishes us is our Jesuit Marymount Catholic mission. And as you know, that's a tradition. A lot of people, unfortunately, think of that as something that has we panelists all signing up every day saying, yeah, we're going to spend half our day in church, we're not going to drink, and things like that. I can't speak for the drinking habits of the panelists, but we are very much an institution built upon and redolent in freedom. So we do welcome students from all faith traditions, students from all backgrounds in all dimensions, and hopefully the experience for those students can be one in which they thrive. So that distinguishes us because we have that driving tradition. So when we speak to our mission, and the third piece is the service of faith and the promotion of justice, the idea there is our faith tradition drives us to promote justice actively. And that is a spirit that resounds within all our faculty and our staff who are very much dedicated to our mission. And this is true no matter one's religious tradition. Even agnostics and atheists contribute in that way. So we have that in common. That's not unusual in the academe, but it's really a focus for us. And that's why we talk about creating the world we want to live in. And we're very proud of that.
Thank you so much. This one is for Kate. Since 2016, the term fake news has been used by the president and right-wing media. How do you teach your students to determine what's real and what's fake?
It's a great question. We talk about it in every class, every course, not every session, but every course that we teach. And I guess I wanted to distinguish. So fake news means different things to different people. So on the one hand, you have, President Trump doesn't like a story on CNN, so he calls it fake news, which is an attack on the press. And then you also have true fake news, truly false information intentionally disseminated in order to deceive the audience. Perhaps with a political agenda in mind. So we talk in our journalism courses a lot about what agenda does this person have, and what are the sources of the information. So we do a lot of exercises in our classes to say, here's a piece of it, here's something that was published, let's run it down. Let's kind of go from the information is published, and then how do we track it back all the way back to the beginning of where that information kind of originated in the first place. But we also teach our students a tremendous amount of information literacy. That's a major component of our courses. I particularly love teaching those tenets to students who are not journalism students, but just happen to take a journalism class. And here's a wonderful opportunity to teach folks how to separate musings from, real, reliable, vetted, deeply reported information. So there's a, kind of distinction between real information and deliberately misinformation, and then attacks also from the president and from others of fake news, just trying to sow seeds of doubt in the public about information that they are sort of reading in newspapers, seeing on television. And like I said in my kind of first response to President Snyder, one of the ways that we can sort of combat the attacks on the press, saying, when someone says this is not true, when it most certainly is, President Trump says the New York Times just made up all these quotes. They didn't really talk to anyone. This is all made up. This is not real. The thing that we need to do, I think, a much better job of in mainstream American journalism is explaining how we did the stories, instead of just publishing stories and being like, just trust us, we're the media. That doesn't work anymore. And I think our readers deserve, and readers and viewers and listeners really deserve to know more about what we do, because journalists, like the lengths that journalists go to verify information, sort of the rules that newsrooms have for how information must be verified before it can be published. These are very stringent and strict rules, as much as, of course, there are mistakes now and again, but even in journalism, if there's a mistake, it's absolutely extremely important that we admit that and correct it. The New York Times prints a page of corrections every day, and we call journalism, the first rough draft of history. And what Professor Bradley is talking about, and Professor Choi and President Snyder, it's really important that we do a really good job with that first rough draft, but also understand that we should be accountable to the public. So we teach a lot of information literacy. We show students how to read complicated documents. A lot of, everything from an SEC 10K form to a 990 income tax return. I use LMU's 990 every year in my classes to show what you can learn about a 501c3 just from a public document you can get via Google. And so we teach students a lot about how to read documents, and also how to, if you don't read a document and you don't understand it, you don't have to suffer. You can just call someone who does understand the document and ask them to explain it to you. Or better yet, call 3 people who understand the document and ask them to explain it to you. So we do a lot on transparency, information literacy. Yeah, that's a lot of what we teach in our courses. So we always encourage students, like I said, who aren't journalism students, to come take at least one journalism class and learn a little bit about how news media is produced, and how to kind of evaluate information that you find, particularly online.
Thank you so much. Stefan, will you please speak about transformation? How is transformation achieved? And can you speak about how you've adapted your curriculum or teachings to focus on that?
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. I think in terms of transformation, to bring it closer to home, in the university, there was a time when nobody studied Black people, aside from the fact that history professors would say that Black people were happy because they were singing in the fields as enslaved people, and then they might make an obscure reference to poverty, the poverty of many Black people being some kind of cultural representation and that sort of thing. It took the disruption of Black students to force institutions here in California, starting in San Francisco State, where you have the very first Black Studies program. It took that disruption to create a certain transformation in university life where this was anti-racism work before there was this title. This was anti-racism work where these people were protesting so that they could learn about Black people on campus. I mentioned this particular example because before then there was no other subject that people had protested to have on campus. Nobody was like, we'll shut it down if you don't bring us our physics, and that sort of thing. So it took this kind of transformation. It took Black students and their allies and accomplices to call for the admission of more Black students, to call for the hiring of Black professors and things like this. Transformation takes place after a certain kind of disruption. Institutions are made to protect themselves and to not make any major changes. This agitation, oftentimes led by young people, and sorry, Prez, it's coming towards you. These young people are pushing for transformation of these institutions that have been proven to support a certain kind of white supremacy. And what does that look like? That looks like the courses that we have to take. Will I find Black people in the courses? Will I find Latinx people and Asian people? So in that way, the transformation is going to be, in some ways, uncomfortable, but it's necessary, and that's how people grow. And so that's how I see transformation working. It will take place in the other institutions in society as well. And so the people on the ground are calling for defunding police departments and things like that. This is frightening to much of America, and it should be. It should be almost as frightening as it should be that some of these police departments have gangs within them, and that some of these police officers are abusing their power. So the transformation is going to require a certain kind of discomfort in reimagining things.
Thank you. Just as a follow-up to your comment, there's another question here. A poll stated that 81% of Black Americans want the same or more policing in their neighborhoods. The BLM narrative of defund the police does not seem to match. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, definitely. I think people, by and large, would be happy to be policed in the same way that people in well-endowed neighborhoods are policed. Say, for instance, in Westchester, I come to work here. I very rarely see police, but I feel quite safe in Westchester. Now, if you go to other neighborhoods, I see a whole lot of police, but I'm not sure I feel safer. And so these are the things that people are talking about. And so defunding the police is something, to me, is one of is a market solution. That is a product that has become flawed in some ways. Should it sell the same? Should we fund it the same? If it's something that's not working out for the consumer well? And so I think in trying to make those two things match or mesh or come together, I think people would be perfectly happy in seeing the $3.8 billion that's used for Los Angeles policing, some of that money go towards, say, for instance, healthcare or early childhood education, or particularly jobs programs that allow for actually hiring in these neighborhoods, to where people wouldn't be faced with the poverty circumstances that allow for a certain kind of crime to occur. So I think those are the things that I'm thinking about when somebody poses a question like that. Thanks for the question.
Jessica, could I add to that? I think there's a lack of understanding about some of the sentiment associated with defunding the police. A lot of people simply think that means, well, shut it off, let's get rid of police. So typically they will argue against that by saying, well, we don't want chaos to reign in the streets. It reminds me a little bit of our misaligned policies associated with drugs. So we spend inordinate amounts of money stopping drugs at their source in various countries, like, say, Colombia, where drugs are known to be produced, rather than spending monies on things like, well, how can we help the persons who become addicted to drugs? How can we deal with that? Idea being, if we can lower the addiction, we help the people, and we then lower the demand for drugs. Same thing with defunding the police. We would have a lessened need for police in the event we could have healthier communities across the spectrum of society. Healthy being things like education. If you look at any state in the Union, you will find that in impoverished areas, take something like science. Those who teach science tend not to have degrees in science in ways that they do in the wealthier communities. Immediately, you're going to have a problem there because you have a lowered quality of learning. So maybe, as you see in LA Times today, the article about the escalation of funding of the police, which has gone up as crime has gone down. Obviously, there may be a correlation there, but it does ask the question, are funds available there that could be reallocated to ways to create a healthier, happier society that needs police in lessening ways?
Thank you. David, I'll direct these questions to you, and I'm going to do kind of a twofer. Do you have a group of entrepreneurs as advisors to your students, and who funds your student projects?
Well, if anybody would like to donate more money to our entrepreneur program, I'll be happy to talk to them. But to the answer to the first question, yes, we have about 100 mentors signed up right now to help our students, advise them, give them guidance on launching their companies, building their companies. So, but we welcome more people. So if any of you listening would like to participate in the Entrepreneurship Program, please send me an email at dchoi@lmu.edu, and we'll sign you up. The more the better, because it's really important for our students to meet talents from the business community and get guidance. We like our education to be as real, as practical as possible. So we welcome you. In terms of funding, yeah, we've been lucky. We've gotten over the years funding from a variety of different sources, and currently we have several funds that are designed to give grants for students working on certain projects. Let's say they need a few $1,000s to a certain machine or a certain prototype. We have those funds, but we like a little bit more. So, if anybody's interested, we're welcome to talk to anybody. But yeah, our students are able to usually develop certain prototypes, and they usually find a little wall in terms of developing the next set of prototypes. But what entrepreneurs do, we find usually a way to make progress. So often our students are able to make progress and create real companies.
Thank you so much. For Kate, I have read a daily paper since I was 13 years old when reporting the news was just that. Can we ever get back to just reporting the news and keeping journalists' personal opinions / biases out of news stories? They say the LA Times is terrible for this.
I would argue TV news is probably the worst in terms of that issue. Yes, so I did want to say something about the defund the police thing too, which maybe I'll come back to and just say one thing. But yes, on that, so what's happened is because of the internet, it used to be that like if you wanted to know what happened yesterday, you would need to pick up the newspaper and read it. You don't need the newspaper for that anymore. If you just want to know what did the president say at this press conference, what did this company do yesterday, how many people showed up here, now we have photographic evidence on social media of a protest that happens. We have it instantly from many, many sources, and we have real photographs, right? We can just through social media and blogs and all kinds of other ways that citizen journalism takes place every day. We kind of don't need newspapers and the news media to give us the basic facts of what happened. I know what you're thinking. Yes, we do. We still need, I mean, we do, but that role of the press has gotten smaller. And it's forced journalists to provide added value beyond just stenography for what happened yesterday. So that is why you see a lot more opinion journalism today, because people don't turn on CNN necessarily to find out if the president is signed an executive order. They can find that out in 2 seconds on Twitter, or on Facebook, or somewhere else. They can see the text of the order themselves. They can see the raw information. Think of it. It didn't used to be that way. There was no way to even see the raw documents. for news that takes place. So yes, I do think it's a problem that people read or watch opinion journalism and don't understand that it's different than straight news reporting. But I think journalists are also really obsessed with like, why isn't this is labeled opinion? Why are people being critical of it? Readers don't read that way, especially our students, especially Gen Z, especially millennials. They kind of don't consume content with those two distinctions in mind. So it is a problem. I hear you. I also, whoever's asking this question, I also do think that in particular broadcast television, and President Snyder knows this, there are some really amazing journalists on television doing great reporting, but there's a lot of talking heads too. And I think we've gotten a little out of balance on that. But the good news, because people aren't looking to journalism to be stenography, it's forced journalists to, like I said, add value. So not just opinion, but also deep analysis, investigative reporting. These are things that are in really high demand now, and are being funded by news organizations, because that's not the kind of thing that can be produced by some random folks on Twitter. Putting together a big investigative project takes money, it takes time, sometimes it takes lawyers, and news institutions can do that work. And that's one way that a news institution can distinguish itself from just all of the content out there and from its competitors.
Can you tell me a little bit about what you were saying yesterday too? Because right now, obviously, investigative journalism is a little bit difficult, and a lot of students might be thinking they have to do their journalism just from home, and being that face-to-face, doing that investigative journalism that way. How are you helping them with that? Because you said that they're still a little reluctant to get out in the field.
Yeah, I mean, investigative reporting, a lot of it is about documents. I know I keep saying that word, and by document, we mean anything, right? A document could be even a video evidence of something. But there's a ton of work that can be done from the comfort of your home. Now, we don't, encourage students, do as much as you can without leaving your dorm room. No, we don't want them to do that. We want people to get out into the communities and to actually talk to people, and also to find regular people to illustrate the larger issues we've uncovered through, let's say, our document work. But it will be a challenge when we go back to school this fall for teaching students how to do reporting. But public meetings are online now. The LA City Council, you can watch it. You can watch the LA Police Commission meetings online. There are ways, I always say in journalism, there really are no roadblocks, only obstacles. There's like always another way to tell the story, always another person to find. And I don't mean to do the academic thing and talk too long, but I did just want to say one thing on the defund the police. Defund the police is, of course, it's an idea, but it's also a slogan and it's rhetoric. And I think we really need journalism to explain, what do we mean by that? And actually, the LA Times, I have criticisms of the LA Times too, but they've done a pretty good job of covering law enforcement in LA, in particular over the last couple of years. And with this defund the police thing, Professor Bradley may have a different opinion. I don't know, but when the LA Times publishes a story by my friend Joel Rubin, who says, here are all the calls that the LAPD did last year, here's what percentage were for violent crime. And people don't know that. It's like, I don't know, something like 15% or something, 5%. Yeah, it's so low. So oftentimes, everyone gets caught up in the rhetoric, but if you just give people information, most people generally perceive the information kind of the same way. Like anyone can look at that and think, wait, this is off. Even if you come from a family of cops, you might say, wait a minute, is this the best kind of use of my tax dollars? So more information, and on a granular level, what do the cops actually do? How has the funding changed over time? I think that stuff's really, really important, and we really need the injection of additional information and analysis from journalists in order to inform that debate and that conversation. So yeah, we need journalism.
Yeah. Stefan, I'm going to get to, next question for you. Your research has focused on movements for social change within higher education. How do you balance your role as an employee of a university while presumably teaching your students how to affect sometimes drastic and disruptive changes at that same institution?
Thanks for the question. It's a tight rope to walk, but the idea is I didn't make the history. I just I speak to it, and students, when they have the opportunity to see how change is made in the past, some things appeal to them, some things do not. One of the things that, and I'm actually pushing back against Professor Pickert just a little bit. There's never been a time when news has been unbiased and there's been, you know, unbiased reporting. That's never happened. Like, the people who are on the editorial boards all looked a certain way up until a point. The people who are behind cameras looked a certain way, and so that which we chose to report on, there was a certain kind of bias in that, and it did involve Black people frequently. And so in that way, we do have to be choosy about how we analyze what's being reported and what we find in journalism and that sort of thing. With regard to the students, students ask me all the time how to be an activist, how to be a student activist. In fact, Professor Pickert, I write about your institution in '68 when students protested and that sort of thing, 1968. But what I tell students is the people who ended up being the best activists were the people who did the most reading, the people who did the most studying, the people who understood systems for what they were and were able to understand how systems work together to help or hinder the freedom chances of other people. And so this is my role, is to teach students about systems, to teach students about what's worked and hasn't worked in the past for certain groups of people. I focus on African Americans and their relationship to the United States and the world. And so far it's been good. What I'd say in just my final seconds here is just, I try to emphasize the fact that institutions can't get better without a certain amount of criticism. That criticism has to come with work, though. So the ability to critique something is good, but it's just the start of something. The ability to work to make it better, that makes for a real activist in that way.
Thank you so much. David, I'll do a final question to you because we're almost at the end of the hour. How important is it? Okay. How important is it that students considering starting a business focus on social good versus simply making a profit? And how do you teach that?
Well, so very good question. You know, at the end of the day, it starts with trying to solve a problem, right? So most of entrepreneurship is about trying to solve the problem, and you know, often what our students end up doing, about 70–80% of the time, without us telling them what to do, they try to solve a certain social environmental problem. So it so happens at LMU, 70–80% of the time, they try to address maybe an environmental problem, a social problem of some kind. Then they try to create a business out of it, because often businesses end up being sustainable. So end up being able to sustain and maintain a solution for long periods of time. The business ends up being a good vehicle for actually solving social problems. You know, in that process, it's also important for the business to act responsibly. So create a product that's healthy, not harmful, doesn't pollute the environment, treats employees well, and so on. And one of the best ways to teach that is actually showing what other companies do, showing possibilities, right? People think you can't do both, right? And for example, in my book, I've got examples of 50 companies that are completely exemplary in how they make a good profit, but also act really responsibly, right? And make a huge impact on the community. So I think the best ways are to show examples. We also bring guest speakers who are exemplary in the business practices. So that's how we do it.
Great. Thank you so much. President Snyder, I'll turn the conversation back over to you to close out. Thanks.
Mute.
Professor Snyder, you're still on mute.
Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, panelists. I think you all can see why I am so lucky to be able to lead this institution. I thank each of you for joining us. Thank you for your questions, for being part of conversation. Through that, you are part of LMU through your engagement and your passion to indeed, as we say, create the world we want to live in. So thanks kindly, and please stay safe.
Thank you, President Snyder and Professors Pickert and Choi and Bradley. We are so honored to have had you today. And thank you again for sharing so many hopeful and positive initiatives at LMU. You're doing such great work. So thank you so very much. For our viewers,
thank you.
If you enjoyed today's quality program, here's how you can help pledge your support. Please text the word GIVE, G-I-V-E, to the number on the screen. We can't do this without your support. And please go to our website at lawac.org to sign up for future programs. We have a terrific lineup of programs for the summer and the fall. We have an election series that starts September 8th. Of course, this Thursday, we have our weekly Politics in the Time of Coronavirus with Professor Dan Schnurr. So please stay tuned, stay informed, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you all again so much. It was